Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazadov's chess channel and welcome to the second day of the finals of the Skilling Open between Magnus Carlsen and Wesley So. So we're celebrating of course Magnus Carlsen's birthday, but of course Wesley So wants to spoil a little bit the 30th birthday of the world champion. We're now in the round 1 of the second day. Who wins now this one I think has good opportunities in the continuation because 4 games again are today played. Today, as Wesley So opened with the white pieces and played the move e4. And here comes, I think, already the surprise, c6 by Magnus, the Kadokan. He wasn't so successful in this particular opening. He lost also many games, but let's see how Magnus will handle the Kadokan defense from Black's perspective. We have d4, we have d5, now e5 by Wesley So, the advanced variation of the Kadokan, and now the best way is, of course, to proceed with bishop to f5. Knight to d2, a very important move because in some occasions we want to have the flexibility to play the move c3 or c4. That's why this knight should be developed on c3 because we want in some occasions to break the position with the move c4 or fix the position with the move c3. So e6, Magnus builds this fortress on light squares like usually in the Kadokan. We have knight to b3 and now knight to d7. We have knight to f3, of course healthy developing move. We want of course to develop our minor pieces and then castle the king and secure the king. So h6, very interesting idea by Magnus, which is of course not maybe the most popular lines, but of course Magnus can play whatever he wants to. Here in the game, Wesley So tried bishop to e2, and we have now a5. What the idea about this move is to really get rid of this very annoying knight. This knight is very well placed. It prevents also maybe a c5 pawn breakthrough motif by Black. Black would love, of course, to break the position with the c5 move, so that's why we want to first deflect the knight from the defense of the c5 and then break the position like that. So here a4, Wesley breaks the position. We have bishop to b4, which is a very cool idea by Magnus Carlsen. He wants to have this at least weakened pawn structure on the queen side. Now white has to react, of course. c3 was split and now bishop to f8 again, which seems maybe like a strange idea, but we don't want really to take this very important square for the knight. If we evaluate always the position of the light square bishops, Black would love, of course, maybe to give up here the light square bishop of against maybe with the potential trades of pieces on d3 and then continuing the game with a very active dark square bishop. On the other hand, White's dark square bishop is not so good as you have placed many pawns on dark squares here, so that's why knight to e7 is a potential idea after bishop to d3. Bishop takes f5 and then we can recapture with the knight. We don't have to mess up our pawn structure on the f file. So in the game castling played by Wesley So, we have knight from g to e7, as I said, h3, trying to make expansions because we have now this block pawn structure in the center, which means the pawns are blocked and basically we're searching the direction of the attack. From White's perspective, the pawns are showing us always a direction. We should aim here against the king side. Of course, Black is trying a pawn breakthrough motif with c5, of course, on the queen side. So in the game, bishop to h7 played by Magnus. He wants really have this very important f5 square fix. He wants maybe to maneuver his knight on f5, develop also the dark square bishop and castle here on the king side. So bishop to d7. We have queen to b6, which is a very aggressive move, creates, of course, this overloading system a little bit. The queen is a little bit overloaded to the defense of the knight on b3. We have knight to e1. What Wesley So is trying to do is get maybe an f4 pawn breakthrough, because as we said, we want to attack the king side, so that's why maybe we can prepare g4, f4, and then also make a very nice pawn breakthrough motif with f5. So here knight to f5. g4 doesn't bring you so much. There are also some lines with knight to h4, then maybe knight to g6. We still can have good squares, but I think you have exposed yourself a little bit too much here with the move g4. Immediately this move has to be further prepared. In the game, bishop to d3, played by Wesley So, competing of course with this very annoying bishop. But I don't think, as I said in the beginning, I don't think that Magnus would have mind if we trade off the light square bishops, although this is a very powerful bishop. But our main goal is the c5 pawn breakthrough motif, to split the pawn chain here on the queen side, and here after bishop to e7, queen to c2. There are now maybe some threats with the move g4, then the knight has to move somewhere and you lose the bishop. So that's why Magnus plays the move bishop to g6. The bishop has to be fixed, which is the accurate move, of course. And now comes maybe the critical moment of the game, c4, played by Wesley So. Very, very risky move, because you see now the d4 pawn is hanging. Of course, there are some tactical threats around the square g6, but that's not the point, because I think, as I said, we should have made progress here on the king side, f4, g4. This is really, and the engine is evaluating also this move as a mistake. c4, Magnus, of course, plays d takes c4 immediately. We have queen to c4, and now knight to d4, deflecting really the queen from the defense of the knight. We have queen to d4, and now queen takes b3, really a forced line. After bishop to g6, okay, we have grabbed a piece. We can also now grab a piece. Black's pawn structure is a little bit messed up, but again, we're talking about these weaknesses, these targets that we can attack. The e5 pawn now becomes really a problem in white's position in the game. After queen to e4, Wesley So simply castle secures the king here. Again, you can maybe here lose a pawn. Bishop, queen to g6 is also a possibility, but as I said, if we get this knight centralized, if we get a nice defensive setup, then I think black is much, much better. In the game, Wesley So realized probably that he made a mistake, tried bishop to h6. If you take g takes h6, this wasn't played in the game, but then you get risks on perpetuals, queen to g6, queen to h6, and at least white has here a draw. But that's not, of course, Magnus style. He sees this kind of things. He plays simply rook to f5. Even g5 is here a possibility, but it leads now into a very, very complicated game. After h4, we can play rook to f4. A counter attack here, the pawn, but now queen to g6 is very, very risky here for black, so that's why I think black has to retreat with the rook to f7, and now after something like bishop to g5, knight to e5 again, and I think black has solved the problems in this particular line. Black is again slightly better. So in the game, after the move bishop to h6, Magnus tried rook to f5, which is also perfectly fine, but this line was slightly better, the move g5. Rook to f5, again attacking simply the e5 weakness. We have bishop to e3, Wesley So finally retreats with the bishop, and we have queen to d5. Again, I'm talking about this relation between bishops and pawns. When you have the dark square bishop, you don't want to have, of course, many pawns on dark square. So that's why even if you manage to protect this pawn somehow in the first place, still this e5 will be the main weakness, because it can really be only defended by the bishop, and you don't want to have the bishop like that. You want to have your bishop active. You see how Magnus has all of his pawns on light squares. His dark square bishop is perfectly fine, so that's why here maybe black slightly better. And again, Wesley So goes into a simplification line, which is not good. Maybe queen to c2 here slightly better. After something like knight to e5, maybe we can regroup and at least some kind of a counterattack we can create here. But after the move queen to d5, now the game is much more simplified, and Magnus creates now here a very, very nice pawn storm motif, because he has now a 4 versus 2 situation. Still, this e5 is a weakness, and you have to protect it like this. You have to play f4, and now Magnus split again the pawn structure with the move g5. We have e6 and counterattacking against the knight, but now knight to c5, and now g4. You can guess what Magnus does now in this particular moment. The rook is hanging. He doesn't want to retreat. He has now, I believe, a good activity. He wants, as I said, to create this central pawn storm, and he decides now simply to sacrifice the rook for the exchange. Because if you try here rook to f4, maybe rook to f4, okay, bishop to f4, it's not about that. Still, I think we can take now this pawn, and again we'll march simply with this 4 versus 2 situation on the queen side. On the king side, it is of course a 2 versus 1, but still, of course, this is a playable and I think a winning game here for black. So that's why Magnus, after this rook sacrifice here, Wesley So simply takes. But now, after f takes e3, we have a new situation again. 2 connected pass pawns, which is really great. And what we want to do is, of course, to connect them to get this pawn on d4, then maybe d3, e2, and then d2, and similar ideas. So That's why Wesley So played rook to f4. He doesn't want Magnus Carlsen to connect his pawns. He is not allowing this scenario. But that's why bishop to f6. We want to play d4. And now knight to c2. And now e2. Very, very risky. You see, we want really to deflect this rook from the defense. There is now the threat, of course, knight to d3 followed with e2. If you get your king to f2, knight to d3 will happen. So that's why here rook to f2, but now comes the stunner d4. Really great tactics played by Magnus. You have to take now the pawn, but now you get the fork on d3, and it's now really better continuation here for black. Rook to d2, d takes c2, rook to c2, but now rook to d8. And Wesley So has also lost the battle on the d file. We have rook to e1, and now Magnus simply grabs another pawn, rook to a1, knight to b2. Again, we can grab another pawn, rook takes a5, knight to d3. Whenever you feel that your pieces are loose and a little bit on the board, regroup, take your time, cement your position, then you will find a way to win this endgame, of course. Here after the move king to h2, Magnus regroups and fixes the position around the square d5. Now we want to get our rook behind the pawns and simply push this pawn further. So rook to a7, it's protectable, of course, rook to b8, and here after the move knight to e7, Magnus created really nice blockade. You will never advance this pawn in the continuation of the game. Here king to g4, and now b5, here simply pushing this pawn further. Okay, again Wesley tries a simplification. Is trying at least to get this rook somehow behind his pawns, but Magnus simply pushed the pawn further. Rook to d8, rook takes d8, rook takes d8, king to h7, and now simply b2 in the game, king to f4, and after knight to d5 in this position, Wesley So resigned. What's the deal about this move? Of course, we can remaneuver somehow this knight somewhere. What we want to do is to get it maybe here to a3, and then simply promotion to b1, or we can simply push this pawn further to c3 if these pawns are connected on this second rank. And again, it's game over here for white in this position. After the move knight to d5, Wesley So resigned. So incredible game by Magnus. This exchange sacrifice was really awesome, but this c4 move I really didn't like. We'll see now what will happen in the continuation of the match game of the second day. Still nothing is lost, even if Wesley loses, for instance, this match game. Still he can tomorrow play in a third match game. Maybe we'll see what will happen now in the continuation of this day, but still Magnus is now in top shape for his birthday. I think it was a good present by Wesley So. Okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. Really nice tactics. If you want to see more games from this tournament, check out my Skilling Open tournament link, my playlist so far that I've created. Here's the link. And if you want to see maybe the best chess games of all times, check out my best chess games of all time series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.